Welcome to the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today I'm excited to welcome our special guest, Justyn Price. Welcome, Justyn. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for having me. Had a good train journey down, so I'm good to go.
Good. You sound excited, and I'm excited too. Justyn's career in sport has seen him shape the direction of coaching across many organisations. He's a passionate advocate of how sport can change lives and believes in putting the rights and needs of players and athletes at the heart of decision making. So I guess that feels like a really great place to start, Justyn. Self-advocacy in sport. Why do you feel it's so important?
I think people should spend time doing things they enjoy. And so if you're going to do that, you have to have sort of utility and agency to say, I like doing this and I don't like doing that. But it's not necessarily the case that you will start with that agency or that voice. People are going to have to create some conditions for that to be possible. So I guess, we'll chat a bit about that today. And I sort of recently, over the last couple of years, have set up a children's team which tried to do that from the start. And I think the way we started that probably encouraged the children to have a voice from the beginning.
So when you said that was the aim from the start, is that affected by experiences you've had in coaching environments leading to that point?
Partly affected by that, and partly affected by both my own son and other children in our community sort of started wanting to play in a team or belong to a team at sort of 9 years old. And 9 is very young in the world, but in some sports, lots of kids have already made a commitment, or their parents have made a commitment on their behalf, perhaps. Yeah. And so every place that both my own son and other people were knocking on the door, people were saying, oh, sorry, either you've got to have a trial or a test, and I wasn't sure people actually knew what they were looking for. Yeah. And secondly, some of them were just full, and that was fine. So ultimately, after much deliberation around the dinner table, I was like, this can't be right. We can't be in a world where children can't play if they want to. And so after ringing 10 or so different clubs, convincing a parish council to mark us out a pitch within an existing pitch, I did what all sort of self-respecting parent would do. Got a message put on the community sort of WhatsApp group, which had some simple messages, which is basically there's some committed parents who want kids to play, want to have an amazing time. Children, if you want to come and have loads of fun, make great friends, learn some footy skills, and ultimately try your best every time we practice and play, this is for you. Parents, if you want to be part of a group of adults that put children's rights and children's desires at the front of how we organise their sport, and if you're up for supporting our team as much as equally supporting every team that we collaborate with, play games, then come and join us. There's no trials, just fill in this form. I'll ring you back on the day that you fill it in, and then you've got a place. And I think we had a team within about 36 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
What does that team look like now in terms of those ethics and the hopes that you had initially? How much has that come to fruition?
It's cool. I mean, it's hard because my friend and I run that team together. I'm really grateful for all his time that he puts into it. Another parent kindly referees and gives his time to do that. And ultimately, where it's ended up now is the other parents refer to our team, we call the Hawks, as like the Hawks family. The WhatsApp group sort of represents the culture of our team. We got a number of boys who do other activities. So one boy does karate and so can only play some of the games, but we're just delighted the games he can come and play for us. Yeah. We've got another couple of boys who are super sort of competitive climbers. And so sometimes like they can't play the games, but just recently they did a competition and their parents posted on the group whilst we were playing how well the boys had done, and the sort of the traffic and the celebration from all the other parents about what those two like brilliant young men had done that day. Even though we're obviously sad to miss them like playing for us, we were celebrating what they did. So there is a real culture of like the children being precious, and we work together to support each other's children, but also appreciate the ones that we play with each week.
When you said about those initial messages you put on the WhatsApp group, it's quite interesting that footy skills is like the third one on that list. So how important is it to you as a coach who's coached people at the top end of football and has coached people through their coaching badges in football for children for play to be the centre of these activities and participation?
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate ambition, I think, whether you're helping people start play or at the top end of the game, is that those people feel a sense of belonging, competency, and ultimately autonomy or mastery, right? That's that self-determination theory, I think, is what coaching looks and feels like. And so, yeah, footy skills is third because actually the boys needed to feel belonging.
Yeah.
And so lots of them had been told there wasn't a space where they wanted to play. Many of them at different points have found it challenging to join in some of the games that happen in the playground because sometimes they can be dominated by particular people who are a bit further on their sporting journey perhaps. And so the number one thing is that the children felt that it was brilliant to be them, and there are football activities that can help them feel brilliant about being them. And my job and the job of the other parents is to select the right activities, the right games, the right experiences, so that they learn to embrace and sort of love who they are in football, and then the rest takes care of itself. People get better at things they like because they spend time doing it.
I want to take you back to mentioning self-determination, which ultimately is something that we are all advocating, is for self-advocacy for children. But how difficult is it to manage that in genuine practice? Because we can say that we want to listen to children and them determine sessions and how they go about things, but it can be like herding cats. So where's the balance and how do you do it?
As a general rule, if children are playing the whole game of the thing they want to do, they behave brilliantly.
Yeah.
And they're not challenging. So I was with a fantastic friend of mine yesterday, Jamie. He's a fantastic sort of mentor to me. He's coached in the Premier League himself, but has also developed hundreds, thousands of coaches over the years. And we were talking about it's not for any adult to withhold a game from a child. Like, they don't wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, I'm desperate to do a practice on long passing. Oh, like that would be so amazing for me." They wake up saying it's practice day or it's game day. Like, I can't wait to play this whole game. And so ultimately, as a coach, we have to commit to understand the whole game, think about how we can stay true to the whole game. For example, almost every practice I'll ever do will be directional, have goals, and mostly have opposition. And so ultimately, it always feels like they're in a game.
Yeah.
And then we either sort of support them to learn in the game, or we might have a bit of a pause on the game to work on something to then go back into the game. And so, it's not always easy. And, anyone who's coached children will know if they've had a test week at school, or if it's the first week of term, or if it's the last week of term, or if it's been windy, or if it's been a terrible lunch at school. Like, all of those things will affect how the children arrive. But ultimately, you have to work with them to establish what's cool and what's not cool. So we have a little thing called the Hort's Code. So the children have helped us work it out. So have fun, attitude, work rate, I'm not very good at spelling, kindness, sportsmanship and skill. And so there are loads of things that we can't control. We can't control who the opposition is that's provided to us in the competitions, but we can control how we do all of those things in the Hort's Code. We can control how we do those when we're away from football and when we're at football. And so having something that you collectively stand for, and that's the little photo now of our team WhatsApp group, and having a laminated card that my friend Matt did, and it's brilliant, that the boys bring to training and bring to practice. Like, they know what they're assessing themselves against, and then what they're assessing each other against. And so when we are managing behaviour, and sometimes it's tough, particularly with your own kids in the team, you're trying to do it in the context of that boundary that you've collectively agreed, as opposed to kind of a random behavioural strategy where you go from 0 to 100 just because kind of you feel a bit annoyed.
Yeah. That Hawks Code is really interesting because I think we talk about advocacy and listening to children, but a big part of that as well is their own self-advocacy and teaching themselves how to manage behaviours and stuff like that. So is that something that you've learned over time, that bringing that into the sessions, or is that something that you've always kind of really believed in?
I guess over many years of working with children in different contexts, the idea of kind of contracting with young people, and that sounds a bit formal, but ultimately saying, when we're in this place, how does this place work for all of us? Like, that's a fundamental thing. I think schools sometimes do it brilliantly, I think sometimes it doesn't always show up as well as they would hope. Lots of youth groups sometimes show up brilliantly, but others sometimes it doesn't show up as we'd hoped. And I guess in this second season that we're in with the boys, this is where we kind of documented the code, I guess. But it was brilliantly delivered by my friend as he introduced it and discussed it with the children. But the main thing is they've given us examples of what each thing showing up looks like. And so I guess one of the things that I was really keen to say today, if I could say anything, was, if you can be anything in the world, be kind, right? That is the core of coaching, I believe. And that permeates our work with the children. But being kind isn't a soft thing. Being a kind is something with teeth as well.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when it is that we have to refocus the children, or there's something that could go a bit unsafe perhaps, we say, like, right, guys, I'm going to be kind to you now, and I'm being kind by doing something that's more tricky for me.
Yeah.
And that's sharing my energy to say, right, let's get back inside the box. Let's work together again properly. And so a key example, last night at training, we played lots of 4-minute matches, which are very intense. It's a very tight sports hall. And the children are learning some of the things that perhaps I learnt growing up in an inner city and playing football in cages and in between garages. And so actually I let the practice go and become a little bit gnarly, but I'm always there.
Yeah.
And my most important job is watching. And then actually, if it boils up a little bit, sports then got a great opportunity to work with these children and help them grow. And so last night, there was a great example where a couple of boys had been brilliantly battling for the ball consistently, and they were probably just on the edge of feeling really frustrated and maybe that boiling over a little bit. So I've got two options. I can kind of just blow the whistle and make a big thing of it, or as the team's walking off, and this is what I chose to do on this occasion yesterday, kneel down, because then it's about us being in it together. And actually on this occasion, they're getting quite tall now, so they're taller than me, and saying, look guys, we are better together. The more we battle and tussle here, the more we've learned and the more control we're taking into Saturday. But it's really important now that you don't let that battling be anything other than a way of helping each other. Like, you guys need to now kind of have a high five and say, great battle, and then leave it, because that's how we do things. And sometimes I think people can worry a little bit about sessions being too tidy.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, like, you're looking for teachable moments. Mm-hmm. And so you set kind of a canvas for the children to have a go at something. What you intend them to have a go at may or may show up depending on loads of things, but don't be a hostage to your session plan. Work with what's happening with the children and help them,
And how much for you, when you talk about teachable moments, is it just about the sport, or is it about them as individuals and making them better individuals?
Yeah, if any person has an increased belief in themselves, an increased confidence, they're going to do better. So you need to, for me, the teachable moments are always appreciating what the children have either attempted to do or achieved, and then anchoring that back to their individual and our group purpose. But then the stories that you hear from the parents about how it's showing up in school, sometimes how it's showing up at home, or how it's showing up in friendships, that's the payment. You do this all for free, but your time and your expertise and your passion is an investment and a gift to your community. And that's what I think coaching is. I don't think coaching is just about being a willing volunteer. I think it's being willing to give of yourself.
You've started this group, and obviously you're taking a lot from it, but you fundamentally started it because of your own son. How difficult is it to coach your son in that environment, and remove perhaps a more formal coaching hat and keep your dad hat on? And how do you balance that? Because for a lot of people listening, they'll be in a similar situation with their kids' teams. Yeah. How tough is it, or does it come quite easily?
It's extremely tough. I am in my 24th season of coaching, I think. And I think it's fair to say that coaching my own children has been like some of the hardest stuff to do. Part of that is because I love them so much, and as a result of that, I desperately want the best for them,
Yeah.
but also kind of we have a different relationship. Like, I am their dad.
Yeah.
I'm not their coach. And I actually had a really fascinating conversation with my son before we went to training last night, where he said, "Oh, Dad, you sometimes treat me differently to the other boys." And I say, like, I do, because you are my son. And I say, sometimes you treat me differently to the other boys. And so we're in his bedroom, getting his shin pads on. It was a brilliant, like, teachable moment. And I said, right, you know, like, I'm no expert here. Like, how are we going to sort this out? What can I do tonight, and what can you do tonight to do it differently? And he said, firstly, he gave me a nickname to call him at training. so
Striker.
yeah, when you speak to me, you need to call me Squiddly. So I've no idea why, but that's what he wanted me to call him. When I remembered, I did. And then we went on to say, well, and I said, okay, well, I can do that for you. What can you do for me? And he says, what do you mean? And I said, well, are there any things you ever do that the other boys just wouldn't do? For example, Rory, when I'm giving like a little message to the kids, would any of the boys sneak behind me and just try and pop a ball up to knock me on the back of the head?
Yeah.
And he always does it, and it makes my friends and other parents like really giggle, because they know if it was their son, it would be really difficult. But actually, we had a brilliant chat about like him acknowledging that the other children wouldn't do that, but him and it made me notice some things about my behaviour and my choices. And actually, we had an amazing time at training last night, and the journey to training and the journey home from training was full of like excitement on the way there and appreciation on the way back. And sometimes it's really difficult, but you have to navigate this line between when am I parent, when am I coach, and actually work with your kids to say, I'm not quite sure if you're willing to do so.
Yeah.
And actually, the more I do that, like, the better we get on.
How helpful is it to have a critic, that your son seems to be, in the house in terms of getting that feedback from sessions? And I'd imagine that there are times where you think, I have got a session, they're going to love this, and it doesn't necessarily play out the way you think, it doesn't land in the way you think. And does it mean that you've got that hotline instantly to be able to say to him afterwards, why didn't everyone enjoy that today?
Sometimes, although also at this age, like, children are still relatively egocentric, and so how they've got on will always be the prevailing kind of bit of feedback, really. But no, it is useful, and he also really is a great encouragement without knowing it sometimes, because I might think, oh, the people have not enjoyed that, or that didn't go quite as I planned, and he might say, oh, we had a great time, we're having an amazing chat on the bench, or oh, did you not see that thing when another player did this? And I sort of reflect, and I was like, oh no, maybe I missed that. Like, and so there's rough and smooth of his gift of feedback. But what I do know is that he regularly tells me he feels much more comfortable and confident to play sport when I'm helping put it on.
Yeah.
And my three sons are all different, and different things from me, and I think he needs that from me. So whatever happens in the future, I feel pretty confident that he'll look back and know that I gave my time because I really love him, really care about him, and want him to feel good about himself. And I think that's not a bad thing for parents to want to do for their kids.
Definitely not. From your perspective, you're in this unique position of being a professional coach and a dad coach. And there'll be lots of people at home listening who are just the latter. Mm-hmm. And there'll be people at home who don't have kids in the group. How have you managed to balance it so that your focus in that group doesn't just go on your son? Not in terms of coaching in the moment, but in terms of needs, in terms of outcomes. How is it that you manage to look at the wider group and even kind of move that subconscious focus on him?
I mean, it's not always easy. That's why working with other volunteers is really important. Just last week, my friend and I went for a beer at our local cricket club to plan training, but also we had a really great conversation, and then a follow-up conversation on another walk, just asking what we need to be for each other's sons, so that there is a coach and there is a parent.
Yeah.
And working with somebody and all the other supportive parents that we have, it really gives you the space sometimes to step back, either as coach or parent, But I think you have to plan for it. And so I think if you know there are particular kind of parents or adults around either your club or your team that your child connects with well, asking them to try and notice your child's good bits on a match day or training and like give them a thumbs up or talk to them. We've got an amazing dad in our team who makes some kind of noise, which is a cross between a strangled chicken, I think, and a hawk. But when the boys are having a difficult moment in the game, he just pops up with this big noise from the sideline, and it helps them like feel good. And so I think like planning for others to catch your child in is a really important thing.
What do you mean when you say catch a child in?
You can do two things as a coach. You can instill belief or erode belief, I think. I don't really think there's a middle way.
Really?
And so other people may disagree. And so I'm always looking for the magic moments that children produce, and they're unique to them. And my job as a coach is to support those magic moments to become more frequent and more consistent and of a higher quality. But there's always something.
Yeah.
And so to catch children in, you have to watch.
Yeah.
And then you have to find the right way for that child to show appreciation. For some of them, it might be a call across the other side of the pitch. For some of them, it might be an eye contact. For some of them, it might be taking their drink to them when they're walking off and just say, I loved it when you did that.
Yeah.
And so you're always trying to find the right way. And even with our group and even with lots of years of coaching, I feel there are still some players that I'm like learning like how to kind of connect with them, or how for me to share a bit of support that's going to make a difference. But like that is why we do it. Like we're in pursuit of like helping people. But the other thing I'd say is, I've said if you be one thing, be kind. That involves being kind to yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes for all coaches, but particularly parent coaches, is that this is a part of your life, and it might be a small part or it might be a massive part. You might be there because you've dreamt of being a coach of your children's team from before you had children. Yeah. It might be because you were actually the slowest one to step backwards when they were looking for somebody. And so you've got to be kind, and you've got to think about how you prepare for training. So I got some great coaching from my wife for this season, and she said to me, is there any danger that you can manage your diary so that on a Wednesday when we've got our middle son at football club and has got to get back from school, and then you've got to get him, get training, get out and coach our eldest son, that you could just not like feel that slot in your diary?
Yeah.
Because I am guilty of sometimes like being physically able to fit things in the day, but those things either not helping like my family or me, you know. And so actually, coaches thinking about, what have I eaten before I coach? Have I hydrated? Have I got a decent night's sleep the night before? How do my meetings look today? Is there anything in my control that means I could not have just got to training through traffic? Or do I need to ask another volunteer to kind of take the first 10 minutes to just let me like take a breath? Sometimes people have just made someone redundant at work and then come and coach a team, or they've just tended for a bit of work that they've lost.
Yeah.
Like, and it could be anything in between, you know. And so the adult coaches, the parent coaches, they're not just a parent, they're not just a coach, they're an adult living life in a pretty chaotic world. And so often I find that more novice coaches are focusing so much on being giving of themselves and helping everyone else that they kind of forget to fit their own oxygen mask first. And that is fundamental if they're going to be an enabler and empower of others. Yeah,
it's an incredible message, I think. In terms of the roles you've had in coaching, you know, places you've worked with, huge resource at your fingertips, big brands, big organisations, big NGBs. Where does coaching the Hawks fit into all of it in terms of how much you enjoy it?
It's probably the most important thing I do, apart from sort of being a husband and a dad. I am genuinely serious about it being an investment in a next generation of people and my community. You know, I'm really blessed to live in the community that I live in, but it's my responsibility to make it better. And so I think, you know, it's really easy when you work in organisations which are pretty high profile a bit like when people are athletes or players, for that to be a dominant part of your identity. And I think now I'm in a position where kind of, you know, I work for myself and I work in lots of different sports organisations. I think running this team coincided with me sort of finding, you know, totally and embracing my own identity. And my own identity is somebody who thinks children have limitless potential. And, you know, as somebody who works for myself, I've now got the flexibility to prioritise giving time to mine and other children in our community. It's amazing. And so, yeah, at times I still get the wonderful privilege of supporting coaches who are supporting players to try and win European Championships or World Cups or develop coaching syllabus. And I love doing all of those things, but I only love it because the people at the end of experiencing that, be it children, athletes. I do a lot of work now in kind of international para sport, and I absolutely love it. But ultimately, it's all the same. You're trying to help people's unique talents bubble up, you know, through handling with care, you know.
One thing I want to kind of pick up on is a chat that we were having before we started recording, and I have used this line quite a few times through the series where I've said, no child is born an athlete.
Yeah.
And you said to me, no one is just an athlete.
Yeah.
And I really want you to speak on that because I just found it's not something I'd really thought about. But I think from your experiences, the fact that you're so keyed into that, I just found a really interesting thing. So when you say no one's just an athlete, how important is it for you to recognise the whole person when you're in a coaching environment?
It's fundamental. All of the coaches I've seen that really make a difference, and be they coaches in community settings, schools, talent pathways, or, you know, professional teams or international teams, the people that have a connection with the person they're coaching are the ones, in my opinion, that are doing the best job and making the biggest difference, because they're able to piece together the jigsaw, which is, okay, this is happening in training, or this is happening in the game. Are there any bits of intelligence or evidence that I know from somewhere else which may be the reason? Are there any ways that how I'm behaving could be colliding with this other piece of the jigsaw, which is then showing up in training and in competition? And I think if you're a coach who cares about the whole person, it means you're more likely to be open to the impact, the intended and unintended consequences of your choices and behaviour on others. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to always be the one to flex, but it means that you have to face up that there's always an impact of your behaviour on others, whatever that behaviour is. And so be careful which behaviours and choices you choose, because you're impacting a person, you're not impacting a footballer or a netballer or a cricketer or a rugby player, you know.
And how much more important is that when it is children at the heart of it?
I think the younger people are, the more they're kind of trying to work out who they are. And so who they are being important to you and important to them seems fundamental to me. And at times I see children who have got an unbelievable commitment to sport and are showing some wonderful individual skills, some wonderful individual tactics. But sometimes I see them look like they're not enjoying it. And I think that's probably the most heartbreaking combination, to see somebody who's obviously had a journey which has enabled them to fall in love with a game or a sport or an activity, but then the context that activity is happening in, or those around them, have built that moment up so that it feels like work.
Yeah.
And for children, as soon as sport feels like work, I think we might have got the balance wrong.
So what would be your biggest piece of advice to novice coaches to affect successful outcomes? That doesn't necessarily mean results in competition sense, but successful outcomes in coaching terms.
I think the first thing is sort of define what you think those successful outcomes are. And I made a little list of that before I came on, because so for me, the sort of successful outcomes are children you work with are more physically active now, but we know the evidence tells us that will lead them to be more physically active as an adult. Children are coming every week, and like if you want, just look at your register, that'll tell you if you're doing a decent job. You want the kids to have sort of more self-belief, and you want to hear stories and make time to hear stories about how that self-belief's showing up other places. You want to hear them playing different sports in different places, because that means you're doing a good job. Like for us, a big change at the Hawks is that some of people's back gardens have got less grass in them now, because they got a lot more mud, because they are practicing. I think without exception now, all the players I see have probably got, multiple football shirts. And when we started, a lot of them didn't have one. We just had t-shirt and shorts when we came to practice. And having the shirts isn't important, but the fact that they're now choosing to say, oh, it's my birthday, I'd like to have a shirt. And the kids either now follow players or teams, and that's a bit different from when I was a kid. You followed your team, but now people tend to follow players or brand.
I think I follow Haaland, so that's okay.
Quite a lot of the children are now attending football matches, which is amazing. And for me, if you think about that whole idea of belonging, and then you think about understanding the game and then trying to have a go at it yourself, they're building up cultural capital or sporting capital, which then they can have a go at. So that's really amazing. And then ultimately, I love it when parents from our group say, I never thought I'd be a football parent. I never thought I'd really get into this, but I just can't help it. I love it. I can't wait to the week. And so for me, that's really good, because they are enjoying seeing their children and other children thrive. So if my sort of slightly long point there is that if there's all those things that can be successes, and clearly I haven't even mentioned winning a game or drawing a game or losing a game then, because that stuff takes care of itself. Ultimately, you'll find the right opposition to be co-actors and collaborators with you, and you'll get the games right. Now, you might get that right through somebody else organising the games, or you might have to make a few more phone calls and sort them out yourself. But ultimately, you can get that bit sorted out, you can get the challenge point right. So then you've got to be genuinely kind to yourself and say, right, if they're the sort of outcomes I'm after, what do I know? Forget about sport. What do I know about people that might make that true? Well, if the kids are having fun, these outcomes are going to happen. So when I do training, how can I make sure that it looks and feels fun? Well, one of the fundamental things is making sure you're just playing the game a lot, whatever game it might be. Second thing, catch the kids doing things well, because as soon as you catch the kids doing things well, you're noticing the individual, and then others will also think, oh, I could probably do that. And then be ready to catch that next person in well. And then the final bit is be unconditional. With your children, your own children, you have to be unconditional. Sometimes they will really test you. And sometimes you could say, oh, I'm not going to ask you to eat broccoli today, but they actually need broccoli. Or any other green vegetable. And you stick with it because you're unconditional in your support, even though that's making that mealtime loads harder. You've got to be the same with your sports coaching and your support. Nurturing those children, give them a chance, give them an opportunity, and over time it will pay you back. So the final thing is just be patient. Don't worry about what happened at the weekend. Worry about over 6 months, what does the register look like? Are loads of people turning up? Worry about when you go on the school run, do the kids that you see want to give you a high five, when you're just around, and don't take it too seriously. It should be fun for you as well as the kids. If it feels like work, something's not right, and you need to chat to the people around you to try and solve that.
Justyn, amazing. I'll tell you what, this certainly didn't feel like work. That was just the most incredible chat, and so much to take from for novice coaches out there, and probably coaches at the top end of the game as well. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've enjoyed. Be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might like it too. Check out our website, www.playtheirway.org, and follow Play Their Way on social media, at Play Their Way on TikTok, X and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram.